Good afternoon. It is Monday, 13th of July, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. You're watching UK Column News. I'm your host, Ben Rubin, and I am delighted to be joined in the studio today by Mr. Brian Gerrish. Hi, Brian.
Pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure. And we're going to be joined from Studio 2 by Mr. Will Keyte a bit later on in the show. Very much looking forward to that. So we've got a packed agenda today, as always. We're going to be talking about the ongoing and increasing attack on jury trials and the British Constitution, the outbreak of wildfires across the country and more widely across Europe, and what we think might be driving some of that. The renewed media attacks on Nigel Farage in the run-up to the Clacton by-election, Andy Burnham's position on planning laws, particularly as it relates to the building of digital infrastructure, a very important issue, the Talmudic nature of artificial intelligence, and the shift of Britain from being a Christian to a post-Christian to an anti-Christian society, and I think potentially back again in the other direction. But before we get into all of that, we're going to be talking about and paying tribute to the late Anne Widdecombe and examining some of the evolving circumstances around her death last week.
Thank you very much, Ben. Well, absolutely tragic. If we just pop Anne Widdecombe on screen there, this picture. Now, this was taken from the video interview that David Ellis did whilst he was with the UK column, and Mike also present on that day. But what we wanted to do is really remember this lady and the tremendous amount of work that she did, not only in politics, but standing up for her country. So she was a member of the Conservative Party. She was later part of the Brexit Party. She actually stood in the same constituency that I stood for many years ago, where she did retain her deposit, but came in third. So that was Sutton constituency in Plymouth. But really a remarkable career and a tragic, very tragic ending. We just want to go through some of the reports that have opened up about her death and the fact that there are a number of questions to be asked about how this is being handled by the police and indeed political circles. And we'll explain this as we go through. But let's have a look at the first clip, which is the Chief Constable from Devon and Cornwall talking about the death as it occurred last week, at the end of last week.
We can confirm that a 26-year-old man was arrested at an address in Newton Abbot this afternoon on suspicion of the murder of Anne Widdecombe. The suspect, who is a white British national, remains in police custody whilst inquiries continue. Officers were called to Miss Widdecombe's home at Haytor by the ambulance service around 11:40 a.m. on Thursday the 9th of July. Sadly, 78-year-old Miss Widdecombe was located deceased within the property. She has sustained serious injuries. Her next of kin have been informed and are being supported by specially trained officers. Detectives from the Force Major Crime Investigation Team have launched a murder investigation and are conducting extensive inquiries into the circumstances surrounding Miss Widdecombe's death.
So that was just an overview of the first report, but also around that report, the police were saying that they'd engaged the terrorist police in order to help them investigate. So the police absolutely in the beginning connecting it by the use of terrorist police or anti-terrorist police with the fact there was something more to this. Now, we get to today, and The Sun has put out this report about the second man that has now been arrested in relation to Widdecombe's death. Let's have a look at the Sun report.
The driveway footage shows the 28-year-old man, now arrested by police, getting into a red hatchback with a large object described by neighbours as a wooden baton protruding from a pocket. He left his home shortly before 8 a.m. last Wednesday and is suspected of driving 267 miles to the 78-year-old's home on Dartmoor. Police say Anne died after being attacked at her bungalow in the remote village of Haytor at 12:30 p.m. that day. This is the police scene behind me here in Rotherham, where police arrested a 28-year-old man on suspicion of murdering politician Anne Widdecombe. A number of unmarked police cars were joined by a police SUV and armed cops. They went inside, arrested the man, handcuffed him in the garden and pulled him out, putting him into the back of a police van and taking him away. It's understood that he will be transported from here in Rotherham down to Devon and Cornwall police station, where he'll be interviewed in the coming hours and days in relation to the murder of Anne Widdecombe. Now, we already know that Anne was interviewed on Talk TV at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, just after the suspect being held by police for her murder set off from home. Anne was due to appear later on Channel 5's Matt Allwright show at 1 p.m. We also know that she replied to a text message from a producer at 12:19 and was due to link up via a Zoom meeting at least half an hour later, but never appeared. The police believed that times the murder at around 12:30, and it was over 24 hours later that her body, covered in blood from severe blunt trauma, was discovered by a carer who wanted to check in on her just to make sure she was okay. That carer raised the alarm, and police began a huge murder probe and launched an immediate manhunt. And that manhunt led here to this red brick council house in Rotherham, where on Saturday night, shortly before 10 p.m, a fleet of police cars, both marked and unmarked, swooped on the property to arrest their prime suspect for the murder of Anne Widdecombe. Officers, both armed and plainclothed, entered the property via the front and the back, and moments later, their suspect was led out into the front garden, where he was handcuffed and then walked to a nearby police van and placed in the back. He was driven away to a nearby police station, and it is believed that he has been transported now from South Yorkshire, from his home in Rotherham, towards Cornwall, where he will be formally interviewed.
Well, that's the report, quite a comprehensive little report, Ben, but so many questions for me. How did the son actually know the identity of this man? Was it released by the police together with his address, or did some members of the family possibly contact the son? Either seems strange because, apart from anything else, the police had got police officers present with the family. This is part of this new regime that the police stay with the victims of crime to help make sure they don't say anything which could be work against them on social media, for example, but also a remarkably well-placed video camera.
Several remarkably well-placed video cameras, yeah.
Indeed. So lots of questions to be asked, but that was the report that came out from the Sun. Now, if we just go back here to Devon Live report from a couple of days ago, Anne Widdecombe murder investigation latest, as Farage told not to speculate. So immediately, whilst they are reporting on this murder investigation, there is an attack on Farage, and we'll come on to that in a bit. But the key points were that the police said that they weren't looking for anyone else after the horrific murder of Anne Widdecombe. They also said that a 28-year-old white man was arrested in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, shortly after 9 p.m. yesterday. That was Saturday. And the police Assistant Chief Constable Matt Longman said that Devon and Cornwall Police were not looking for anybody else. And they said that there was no information to suggest it was a terrorism-related incident, and the police were open-minded about the motive. Now, this, of course, is in contrast to what the police said at the very beginning, but he added there was nothing to suggest that it was politically motivated at this stage. And then the Assistant Chief Constable Longman urged the public not to speculate online, describing it as unhelpful and distressing to the family and friends of Miss Widdecombe. But what was the Sun doing in that extended report, Ben? There are so many questions to be asked. If you're a member of the public, you shouldn't be talking about this, apparently, because it's distressing for the family. But if you're the Sun newspaper, you know the man, you know the address, and you can start to build up your own investigation of the story. So very many questions here. But I'd just like to remind our audience that the Devon and Cornwall police quickly use the assistance of counter-terrorist police, but then say there's no information to say that it's terrorist related. Now, what's special about Anne Widdecombe? Let's go back to the interview that David Ellis did with her. And I'm going to deliberately repeat the little clip that Mike played on the UK Column News on Friday, because I think that what she's talking about is so important. So let's listen to this first little clip.
I mean, the level of the fines, for example, and the ability of people being told to snitch on their neighbours. You know, we're running a quasi-Stasi here. I mean, it's quite wrong. But that wasn't quite what you asked me. If we go back to what you were asking, has the military anything to do with the narrative? The answer is no.
I think that's exactly the case. I'm delighted that you've highlighted the sort of ministers becoming, to an extent, invisible, because it looks like we've got the failure of cabinet government, and somebody that served in cabinet government. You know, what's your take on the current situation that we don't seem to have action and resolution in any timely fashion?
Well, I think that if you went out upon the streets with a microphone at the moment and you asked people to name, say, the Secretary of State for Transport, or whatever it might be, people would be very hard put, because we're not seeing cabinet government at the moment. What we're seeing is a dictatorship of a few under emergency powers.
So key warning words. She's looking at the system. She's describing it with the word Stasi. She's talking about missing or invisible ministers, no longer consulted in the reports from the mainstream press. Very, very critical analysis. Now, there are some of the things that Anne Widdecombe said the UK column would not agree with. But if you take her commentary overall, she saw something very dangerous was coming into play in the United Kingdom. Let's listen to the second little clip from that interview.
Definitely, Anne, something that you would not like to see.
It's something I'm quite determined should never happen. But also, I think you've got to consider what you don't want to get is is the people versus the military. And if the military are on the streets, keeping order, telling people what to do, that could set up quite a tension, which is completely unnecessary. And I don't know whose wild idea it was, but it needs to be very firmly put back in its box.
You don't think under the current circumstances that it's justified at all?
Look, if we had riots on the streets every night, and if we had a civil war or something, then you might talk about the government using the military. But for heaven's sake, when all you want is ordinary, effective policing, that is not a job for the military.
No.
So Anne Widdecombe picking up there on suggestions at that time. We're talking a few years ago that the police and the military should be much closer together. Then remember, of course, during the COVID-19 period, we had 77 Brigade intelligence part of the army being used to target members of the public in case they were being active and challenging the government's policy. So Anne Widdecombe clearly seeing dangers. Now let's come to the present. Last few days, we had trouble on the streets in London as a result of Morocco losing their match with France. And if we just bring a little bit of the action onto your screen, this is what the police were faced with, I believe, in Tottenham Court Road, and quite dangerous for the police, because you will see that eventually a relatively small group of police, and these are not riot control police, are actually surrounded by the crowd near their van. So this had the potential to become very dangerous if this crowd had got too aggressive. There are the police, they retreated back to their van, but essentially they are surrounded by the crowd that are using smoke and fireworks. Now, when I spoke to a member of the community in London, he said, well, we've seen all sorts of trouble with football fans, so there's in some ways nothing very special here with the Moroccan fans. But the point I'm making for our audience today is that increasingly we are seeing trouble on our streets, and Anne Widdecombe clearly warning back there that this could be the trigger to bring in the army on the street. So this lady very perceptive as to what was going on. Now let's move over to Nigel Farage attending her property in order to lay some flowers, and he made some comment about Anne Widdecombe. Let's listen to what he said.
She was a remarkable individual, redoubtable, I think the word was invented for her. Opponents knew exactly what to expect from her, and at times, I have to say, colleagues did feel the wrath of her tongue. She was the fiercest proponent of free speech I think I've ever met. She believed that we had the freedom and the right to say things that insulted each other. Her career in politics, of course, spanned decades as a minister, and then for many years as a shadow minister. And I spoke to one of her colleagues last night who said during those years in a shadow cabinet, she was the only one who always spoke up for what she believed to be the national interest. Her patriotism was deep within her family. She was immensely proud of the work her father had done with the Royal Navy during the war. Suddenly in 2019, as it appeared that the Brexit vote wasn't actually going to be carried out by the government or Parliament, I took a phone call one day at Widdecombe here. I sort of stood to attention. I mean, you would, announcing that she'd love to run for us in the European elections. Her joining what was a completely brand new party directly contributed to us winning by a country mile 6 weeks later.
So we had Devon live using the police report into the death of Anne Widdecombe. That was used to attack Nigel Farage for making what I think was a very measured commentary on her. And as our audience will know, I certainly don't agree with a lot of things that Nigel Farage says and does. But in this case, he was very measured. But what did he say? In his opinion, Anne Widdecombe was a major boost to effectively winning Brexit. That would make her very, very unpopular with a great deal of people in the higher levels of the politics and the establishment in UK. Now, on top of that, if we go back to the beginning of the year, Dominic Cummings, just come back here, Dominic Cummings was actually warning that there was a campaign to, quote, destroy Nigel Farage, and this was commented on by The Spectator. We've got a little video clip of Cummings talking where he says what he feels.
Don, when we interviewed him a few months ago, said two things which have come to pass.
Let's smash the absolute living shit out of Farage and make sure that he doesn't win by fair means and foul. They'll leak medical records, they'll leak tax records, they'll bug his phone and leak that. They'll do anything that they need to. You watch Hillary, John Kerry and whatnot now, they're extremely explicit in saying, quote, the First Amendment was a historic mistake and it must be undone, unquote.
Yes. Both of those things are happening. Now, I say that as someone who thinks Farage has a case to answer. He has not handled this issue well.
No.
And there are big questions about reform's fitness to govern. But nevertheless, is it the case that all of these things coming together are just a little too convenient for the anti-Farage forces?
In some ways, I'm not giving answers to exactly what's happening here, but I'm pointing people at questions to be asked because Michael Gove there starting to say there's something possibly not quite right. Now, is he on side of UK or offside? We don't know that either. But key comments from Cummings. Now, let's also just have a quick look at what's been reported in the press around Nigel Farage, because a while back he was under fire for taking a mere 500k in donations that had come into reform. That's increased now to 5 million. And he's being slaughtered really in the press. And why is this? Well, of course, even if Nigel Farage as a leader was not doing the right things, the body of the Reformed Church, or indeed Restore, could take the right actions in order to tackle the breakdown of this country and its infrastructure, the Constitution and the rule of law. So at the moment, is there a reason why the deep state should be attacking on the back of the death of Anne Widdecombe and getting for Nigel Farage and Restore? And reform, yes, indeed there is. Now, just contrast the way the press is behaving with Nigel Farage with this report on Labour. This was Open Democracy from a little while ago. Labour given 4 million from tax haven-based hedge fund with shares in oil and arms. You're very familiar with this hedge fund, Ben. Let's just bring it on screen. This is Quadrature. They say we're building the ultimate automated trading business. They put 4 million into the Labour Party, but of course that comes with strings. And if we have a look at what those strings are, this is the statement by Quadrature itself. And it said that they've been having a look at the UK government's commitment to the green transition of the economy, and would it have the ability to drive change that's so urgently needed. They decided that Labour was the best party to support, in that it had policies that will deliver climate action while also promoting social equity and economic resilience. So this is lobbying on a vast scale, Ben, but at least it's open. This hedge fund says we're putting the money in so that we can get what we want out of the Labour Party. But if money goes into Nigel Farage and reform or restore, then of course the deep state and the existing political powers are going to challenge that flat out. There's something very dirty going on here. And I think Anne Widdecombe was absolutely right when she's starting to use terms like Stasi. She's starting to look at the breakdown of the state, ministers becoming invisible. And I think that some of her early warnings from several years ago were absolutely spot on. The money, is that connected with her death? We don't know, but certainly lots of questions to be asked.
Lots of questions to be asked, yes. So rest in peace, Anne Widdecombe. I actually saw her not so long ago. I attended Mass at Buckfast Abbey, and I was sitting immediately behind her. She was on the pew in front of me, and she was praying her heart out, I would say. She was on her knees. It seemed to almost like she was wrestling with something, actually. Right. You know, but it was interesting seeing her in public. And then for this to happen just a few weeks later is quite remarkable for me. Yeah. So
a very personal and poignant moment there to be close to her in church, and clearly a spiritual lady who was praying for what we don't know. But,
we certainly don't. But I do think that she would resonate very strongly with the next story that we're going to talk about, as we're going to look at the transition of British society from Christian to post-Christian to anti-Christian, which is where we are now, and then I think, and back again. And there's a good ending to this segment, which we'll come on to shortly. Now, this is going to focus around a story that's been ongoing for some time. It relates to this organisation, Trent College and the Elms. And this is very familiar to me because I actually went to that school between 1995 and 2000. And we had a different head back then. It was called Mr. Lee. We've now got Mr. Penty, who's the head at Trent College, and then the junior school is the Elms. I didn't attend the junior school, but it seems to have changed quite a bit. It's still got beautiful grounds, but, you know, it's developed, got larger, expanded its estate. And Mr. Penty and others decided a good few years ago now to invite this lady in to talk to the staff and to the pupils about educate and celebrate and the LGBTQ plus agenda. Did I get that right? There's too many letters now.
It's pretty difficult to keep track with it all. But I would say this is exactly the agenda and the classroom activity that's being challenged by the women of Public Child Protection Wales.
Yes.
Who've been doing such fantastic work to expose effectively the grooming of children through this type of syllabus.
Exactly, yes. So if we could just bring Ellie Barnes back on screen. Then, so just to give you a bit of background here. So this was a new organisation, Educate and Celebrate. She set it up. It had government grants at the time, but it didn't have any kind of formal accreditation. And it had been established to, in their own words, embed education on gender and gender identity and sexual orientation into schools with a focus on primary and secondary education. So this is from 5 years old. And their aim was to suppress biphobia, homophobia, and transphobia, to break the gender binary, and importantly, smash heteronormativity. That was what they were there to do as part of their training. Now, they ran into a bit of a snag because on the staff at the time was this gentleman. This is Reverend Dr. Bernard Randall. He is a doctor because he has a PhD from Oxford. He then went on to be a chaplain at one of the colleges in Cambridge University. He then became the chaplain at Trent College. So this is an Anglican school with an Anglican chapel, with an Anglican ethos. And as an Anglican priest, he raised concerns about the sessions being run by Educate and Celebrate and the idea that we needed to smash heteronormativity. He raised these concerns with staff, for which staff decided to report him to Prevent as a potential terror threat for expressing these concerns. He was then, Prevent, by the way, turned that away. So they said there's no case to answer here. The school then contacted the local authority to see what they could do. In the meantime, while this was going on, a number of the children in the school came to Bernard Randall to ask his opinion on these courses. And he told them essentially to make up their own minds. And he delivered a sermon in chapel, which I think we used to do 2 or 3 times a week, basically saying the Christian view of marriage is it's between a man and a woman. And what I encourage you to do is to interrogate any ideas put in front of you and to make up your own mind. Which seems
reasonable.
Entirely reasonable, doesn't it? And unfortunately for him, that got him into a lot of trouble. So the school then went to the Bishop of Derby, it's this lady, Libby Lane, who's the first woman appointed as a bishop in the Church of England, who is a feminist and apparently sees herself as a natural ally of LGBTQ activism. And she decided that he was an acute safeguarding risk because of what he'd done and that he should be sacked. And we got a little clip now of Bernard describing that process and what he went through.
The situation I've been put in is so absurd, you know. How can the Church of England bar one of its own clergy from ministry, from preaching, simply because he taught what the Church of England teaches? Marriage should only properly be understood as being a lifelong, exclusive union of a man and a woman. This is only about the sermon. There's no concern about any actual behaviour with anybody. There's no evidence I've ever behaved inappropriately. There's no evidence of anything that I've ever done wrong. It's just about the sermon. All I was doing was saying the Church of England's teaching is positive and you may accept it. And so, I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologise for a sermon which says you may accept the Church of England's teaching. I was ordained in the Church of England to proclaim the Church's teaching. I can come in, I can sit and worship in the congregation, but I wouldn't be allowed to sit here at the front as a minister. I wouldn't be allowed to go up to the communion table to preside over the Lord's Supper. My fear is what has happened to me is what will happen to lots and lots of people 5-10 years down the line.
So, Ben, my initial reaction to that is that what he's describing and what's happened to him, that is a Stasi state at work. And that
Indeed.
Stasi state wants the minds of the children. It's going to go for the children. And I'll just come back, think about what Anne Widdecombe was warning about all those years ago. And clearly her mind and her memory were absolutely spot on to be able to judge what was happening and what has been happening in the United Kingdom in 2026. Indeed,
with this being a particularly pronounced example of that, I would say, but it's happening absolutely everywhere. So Bernard was defrocked. He then went to an employment tribunal, and the tribunal found against him on every count.
As you might expect.
As you might expect, exactly, yes, because he's clearly a danger to children, right? They then went to the Archbishop of Canterbury, who reviewed the case personally and said that everything was fine.
This is the man who had to tell the ICSA child abuse inquiry that, as far as the Church of England was concerned, he had to admit that everything was not fine with the Church of England with regard to the protection of children.
And he's no longer in that job.
And he's no longer in that job.
As a direct consequence of that.
He was in judgment to this man.
Exactly, it was, yes. And then this also, interestingly, links us right into the top levels of the British aristocracy, because Peregrine Cavendish, the 12th Duke of Devonshire, seen here, stood in, well, I've placed him in front of Chatsworth House. He's president of Trent College. And the Duke of Devonshire, one of the most senior aristocrats in the hierarchy in the UK, he was, amongst many other things, the Queen's representative at Ascot, which I think makes him about as high up as you can get if you understand the royals' relationship.
The horses, yeah.
Exactly, yes. Which shows that this ideology has possessed the entire apparatus of the British state, the clergy, and absolutely everything else. In the meantime, while this has been going on, because it's been rumbling for 7 years now, a number of things have happened to the charity Educate and Celebrate, interestingly, relating to a number of their patrons. So this individual, Jordan Gray, a supposed comedian who was a patron, decided to strip naked on live television. So this was on Channel 4 one Friday evening on some talent show, decided to strip naked and expose himself to the public. Extraordinary behaviour. Also, this chap, Stephen Ireland, was sentenced to 24 years in prison with a further 6 years on extended licence in June 2025, after he was convicted of multiple serious child sex offences, including the rape of a 12-year-old boy, sexual assault and possession of indecent images of children. He was a patron of that charity. And as a consequence of those two things happening, and probably a few other things that haven't made the headlines, the charity was dissolved by the Charity Commission back in 2024, and which is just an extraordinary embarrassment for all concerned.
Should be,
yeah. All the people that we've named up to this point, the staff, the trustees of the school, the pupils. If I was a parent, I'd be asking very serious questions about the faculty. And luckily, there is a good news story to end this, which is that after 7 years, Bernard Randall has finally been reinstated to his position as chaplain of Trent College. So somehow sanity has prevailed finally in this instance. I'm hoping and thinking and going to say that I think that this is a turning point potentially, and actually we're heading back in the other direction now.
It also shows us, Ben, that when an individual does not give up, they are going to fight, and they're going to continue to fight for what is right, the truth, justice, morality. Things can change, and there are so many people who will want one individual politician maybe is going to be the saviour. No, it requires a great many people to fight 7 years and beyond, as this man has done.
Absolutely. And I should say, we hope in the not too distant future to have Bernard on for an interview, and we can get more of his side of the story.
That'll be excellent.
Yeah. So, right. If you enjoy what we do, and you appreciate the work that the UK column puts out on a daily basis during the week, then we need your help. And you can head over to ukcolumn.org, go over to our website, and if you want to support us, you can hit the click here button, which will take you through to this page where you can make a donation of absolutely any amount you decide, or you can take out a monthly, annual, or a lifetime membership to get access to the comment section on the website, join the live chat during broadcasts, and become a member of the community. You can also buy a copy of the latest edition of The Column, our new magazine. It's the second edition. It has been hitting doormats over the past few days, and it's absolutely fantastic piece of work. The whole team, I think, is incredibly proud of it. And we've really laid down a marker with this one. Thank you to Diane and everyone involved. You can also pick up a ticket to the 20th anniversary which is coming thick and fast towards us right now. It's just over 2 months away. That's from the 18th to 20th of September down here in Plymouth. We can absolutely, positively not guarantee that the weather's going to be as good as it has been or as good as it is in this video in front of us here, but it's a stunning location, an incredible cast of characters, and we cannot wait to have everyone who's already bought a ticket with us. And if you haven't got one yet, there are still a few left in the shop.
But
Go and grab one.
Don't leave it too late, though.
No, don't leave it. Once they're gone, as they say. So later on tonight, Mike and Germ will be talking about the history of UK column. That's from 9 p.m. Sorry, it should be from 7 p.m. Apologies, there's a mistake there on the slide. At 9 p.m, we have Silk and Steel, which will be Carl Zar talking about China's tech stack from 6G to nuclear subs. You can find out about what the Chinese have been up to in the technology race. And then, Brian, you've got a couple of interviews coming up this week.
Yes, so tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we've got part one of Unmasking the War in Ukraine. This is with Deepti, an analyst with Unit. Now, Deepti has joined the UK column on a couple of previous occasions. Very, very interesting and well-informed lady, very brave. She's been spending time in Ukraine. That has now brought her in conflict with UK intelligence. She's recently been arrested and interrogated. She's released, but she's restricted to sleeping at her home, all because she's been part of an international initiative to try and bring peace to Ukraine by telling the truth about the origins of the war and what's really going on. So tomorrow at 1 o'clock is part one. And if we just move on, Thursday at 1 o'clock, we'll have the follow-up part, which is part two, and Deepti covering some really incredible material. Now, say this lady has put herself at risk because she's now absolutely in the intelligence and security spotlight of the United Kingdom. But a lot of this is if you dare challenge the government's narrative here in UK in 2026, you become a terrorist or you're working for the Russians or the Chinese. So that word Stasi that Anne Widdecombe was prepared to use, absolutely on the button. But please join me tomorrow at 1 o'clock for part one of the interview.
I'm looking forward to it. Okay, jury trials under attack. What do you got, Brian?
Well, I've got that a number of people have really picked up on the importance of jury trials. And Defend Our Juries is an organisation which is out there. It's attracted a lot of people. And I'm going to say it has been doing some really good work. But some people are saying, well, it's doing some good work with one hand, but with the other hand, we're not entirely sure what's going on because there's some links via individuals to, for example, Stop the Oil. And that was one of the organizations that originally many people were saying was a construct in order to help drive a political debate around about oil and oil fuels. So we're going to take our report down the middle and say we think this organisation is doing some good work. Now, I was sent an email to say that on Friday, a number of individuals connected with Defend Our Juries and their protests in support of Palestine had been arrested. I was given a pointer through to this YouTube site, Saving Lives is Not Terrorism, where there are 5 YouTube videos listed. But there's a little warning, a caveat, which says replicating these videos comes with a risk that you may put yourself effectively under surveillance by UK terrorist police. So I will put a link through to this thing. As far as I can see, watching these clips is not a problem. However, this is the state of the country, that if you are talking about what's going on in courts, you're talking about the destruction and slaughter of individuals in overseas country, you are going to put yourself in conflict with both the police and, as we've heard with Deepti, the security services. So I'm just highlighting to the audience that this organisation is there. There are some very good people associated with it. They're working very hard. And on July the 30th, at Westminster Magistrates Court at 12 p.m, they're actually holding a rally and they're inviting people who come to wear something that's red. And the key statement is that saving lives is not terrorism. Now, the interesting thing is a lot of this hangs around the power of the jury in UK. And I'm very glad that we have William Keyte with us today, because, William, you've been investigating, analysing, researching both common law and natural law for some time. And you're one of the people who've spoken out for a great many years about the power of the jury in the United Kingdom, and of course the reason why we absolutely have to keep it. So, William, welcome to UK Column News.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you, Ben. It's good to be on.
Okay.
So yes, you are absolutely right about the importance of the jury. Absolutely, and I would agree with your sentiment about need to tread carefully with defend our juries a little bit. They seem to be doing some good things under the surface, but they're kind of carrying the jury principles and then tying it up and associating it with some very sort of direct action issues, some very political, some would say extreme political issues on one side. And I think we have to watch that very carefully. I've reached out to them in the past a couple of times. I've never had a reply.
Right, again, and this is a very important point, because we have also said this about reform and restore, that if you follow the leadership line, there are some questions to be asked, but many, many good people involved with the parties, members of the parties, activists who are seeing the bigger picture and are getting out to do some good things. So I think we'll just echo, whatever organisation you get involved with, don't just go with the flow. Keep an eye on what the real policies are and objectives, because the truth's got to be told in a very measured and constructive way, if the other side is not to use it as a battering ram against anybody challenging the state. William, so the floor's yours for a few minutes. Tell us what you've been looking at and what you think the UK column audience should be paying attention to with respect to juries and indeed matters to do with the Constitution.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, there are some always interesting things going on in the world of the Constitution and trial by jury, not least at the moment. And at the moment, what's particularly interesting is that we're seeing some interesting cases coming up at the moment that have some common elements. And in particular, what's fascinating about them is that the fundamental sort of constitutional distortions, if you like, are sort of becoming exposed within them. There's a kind of sort of incoherent logic that we're starting to see coming through, and I'll get into that. But it's really as a result of a kind of faulty belief which sits sort of underneath our current justice system, our current rule of law. There are distortions in there. So within these cases, we're sort of seeing sort of massive contradictions coming up to the surface, circular arguments. It's kind of Mad Hatter's Tea Party stuff going on. And you'll see that as we get into it. And if people would like to see that in a lot more detail, I would recommend people go and have a read of the judgment, the Webster case, in particular, paragraph 55. Just have a look at that if you're particularly interested. But the cases in question are, you've talked about it already, I think, on the show, the Filton 4 case, which is very interesting. Most importantly, at the moment, what's happening is that we're seeing that the lead defence counsel, Rajiv Menon KC, is facing contempt of court proceedings, supposedly for misleading the jury, and of course, talking about jury equity, which is the term that we seem to be having to use now, jury equity. I'd rather use the term jury independence, but there we are. Now, the other case that's a little bit less known is the case of Dale Vincent. Quite recently, he's a military man. He formed a group in 2022, which included Mark Sexton, and briefly, they went in to close or tried to close a vaccine facility in Bristol. And in the end, when the police were not doing anything to prevent a greater crime as they saw it, including the evidence from sort of video statements from Asim Malhotra and others, Dale decided to make a citizen's arrest on one of the police officers. It's all on video, actually. It can be found. And Dale was then charged with assault of an emergency worker. So it's quite interesting that these cases that are coming up seem to have a sort of a common element to them, in which we're seeing a kind of restriction of the jury to see defense evidence, along with a restriction in some way of the jury organically using their conscience in some way. These are the kinds of things that are coming to the surface. And what's interesting about this is that within the establishment, within the world of MPs and lawyers, we've certainly seen this over the last winter and early spring, when the Leveson issue was still very much on the table. And we saw this in social media, massive sort of support and in defense of trial by jury by lawyers and MPs alike, talking about how it is the bulwark, the constitutional principle that is the protection of the people. It's the cornerstone. And yet, at the same time, when they go into court, lawyers are routinely witnessing judges effectively lying by omission to the general public, to the jury, about the principle of jury independence. So we decided to put together a meme which kind of encapsulated some of these kind of contradictions, these circular arguments. And there's a slide which you can by all means put up. And what it basically says is, are you telling me that a judge cannot lawfully do A, which is on the left-hand side, but he may do B? And what we're effectively saying is that all of B amounts to the same thing as A. And what A is, of course, is the judge cannot direct a jury to convict, which they recognize, they admit. But if we examine what B says, and we'll just very quickly go through them, and you'll sort of see where this is going and the language behind it. So a judge apparently can, 1, remove the defendant's defense from consideration by the jury. Difficulty with that, of course, is that you're then not getting to mens rea, which is the state of mind. That's an important point to understand. The second point there is that the judge can give legal directions to the jury that, if followed, can only lead to a guilty verdict. The third point, really have a listen to this one. The judge can preclude the jury from knowing that the judge cannot direct them to convict. So in other words, the judge doesn't want the jury to know that he can't direct them to convict. So why would that be then, I wonder? Point 4, the judge can tell the jury that they must follow his directions on the law. And the last one, number 5, the judge can prevent the jury from knowing their right to judge according to their convictions. So we said at the bottom, we said, actually, I can't find it. Where am I? Oh, yes. So don't you think that men on the Clapham omnibus would struggle to see the difference? Yeah, it's essentially amounts to the same thing. So what you're seeing here is just massive contradictions in what they're claiming. On the one hand, they're saying, yes, there's a kind of an organic nature to justice, which is built on the common law, on the idea that jury independence is the key. But then on the other hand, we're going to sort of direct everything. We're going to impose a framework over it. And it's worth pointing out this best and illustrating it by just quoting Lysander Spooner here. So if you put on the next slide there, but for their right to judge of the law and the justice of the law, juries would be no protection to an accused person, even as to matters of fact. 4, if the government can dictate to a jury any law whatever in a criminal case, it can certainly dictate to them the laws of evidence. That is, it can dictate what evidence is admissible and what inadmissible, and also what force or weight is to be given to the evidence admitted. If the government can thus dictate to a jury the laws of evidence, it can not only make it necessary for them to convict on a partial exhibition of the evidence rightfully pertaining to the case, but it can even require them to convict on any evidence, whatever, that it pleases to offer them. Lysander Spooner, in his essay, written in 1852. Read it. Really important essay.
William,
so you can see. William, go on, Brian. Sorry.
I'll just come back in very briefly, if I may, and say it is incredible, isn't it, when we look at texts written many years ago, there's sort of a peaceful accuracy against them. They use a language which is very specific, and to me that paragraph absolutely captures the problem that we are facing today.
Absolutely. And just to jump in there, Will, for clarity on your extremely highbrow meme, which I can just put up on screen again quickly.
That was designed for lawyers, very much.
Yes, very clearly. Yeah, it's a very, very high-end target audience. The things on the right amount to the things on the left, but the judges aren't allowed to do the thing on the left, but they are doing the things on the right. Essentially, what you're saying, right?
That's exactly it.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they're not allowed to direct the jury to convict, but they're doing everything other than...
They're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
William, can I just also add that in our chat box, there's a little bit of commentary about the expression "the man on the Clapham omnibus." I just want to stress that this is an expression used at law to describe an ordinary man or woman going about their peaceful everyday life. There's nothing demeaning about it. It's simply a historic expression which represents the ordinary man and woman.
That's exactly right. Yes, should have said that. Yes, that's the test, if you like, is what would the ordinary man think? And the man on the Clapham omnibus is often used as the thing. But yes, so you're seeing these extraordinary contradictions. And of course, we need to remind ourselves that, Magna Carta didn't. It didn't say, no man shall lose his liberty, and I'm paraphrasing here, his estate, his livelihood, except by the judgment of his peers, ... specifically on the facts only and not the law, or only if the judge directs you to do so. This is the problem, is that we've got contrivances at play. We've got this sort of impulse to control, to place a kind of a uniformity over the top of justice, not to have it too organic, please. Let's not go there. So it'd be worth just reading out the next slide, which is Geoffrey Rivlin, KC. I think that one, yes, you've got that one there. So just pull that one on. So this is Geoffrey Rivlin quoting Lord Bingham, particularly important, this one. So have a listen to this. Lord Bingham insisted that the right of the jury to return the verdict it collectively believes is the true one must be inalienable. Even if the verdict might appear perverse or contrary to what an experienced judge or lawyer thinks, I have no doubt that when new legislation is being considered by Parliament or decisions are taken by prosecutors, the inescapable sobering thought hovering in the minds of each is or should be, could we, and this is key, listen to this, this is the twist, okay, the logical twist. Could we ever get this past a jury? We should realise that under the new proposals, if a government wishes to whittle away at our freedoms, it only has to ensure that the maximum sentence for any transgression will be 1 of 3 years. So what we're harking back to there is the proposals in the Leveson Review and the further curtailing of trial by jury, which of course they imagine and believe they absolutely can do. Why do they believe that? Because they believe that they have the right to categorize offences. So they're bringing about these kinds of conditions, they're driving certain specific procedures, categories, and imposing a kind of matrix over the top of what is really an organic justice process. It's a circular argument, of course, because trial by jury is the check on legislation, but they want to use legislation itself to remove that check on legislation, right? This is the kind of circular argument stuff that's going on. If we've got time, one more slide, perhaps it'd be worth just quoting Lord Bingham here. And here he is, that the last word should rest with the jury remains. As Sir Patrick Devlin, writing in 1956 in the Hamlin Lectures, here it is, an insurance that the criminal law will conform to the ordinary man's idea of what is fair and just. If it does not, the jury will not be a party to its enforcement. The executive knows that in dealing with the liberty of the subject, it must not do anything which would seriously disturb the conscience of the average member of Parliament, or I don't mind so much about the average member of Parliament, but I do mind about the average juryman, is what he says. I know of no other real checks that exist today upon the power of the executive. Lord Bingham quoting Sir Patrick Devlin. So why has this happened? Yeah, and just very quickly to finish off, is that why are we getting these sort of imposed restrictions, these kind of procedures to kind of unify everything? Well, because there is an impulse generally to take control. That's not necessarily coming from a bad place always. I'm sure that there will be some that are doing that. But there is a tendency within man generally, and we're getting into the human psyche, which is some of the things that I tend to deal with, which is that we need to guard against things. And in doing that, what we're going to need to do is to regulate something. So a couple of examples very quickly of how these things come about would be, first of all, issues around sort of eyewitness testimony, for example, can be very persuasive and yet simultaneously notoriously unreliable. So do we want the jury to see that? Yeah. We also have the issue of previous convictions, which the justice system has understood to be a tricky conundrum, a dangerous thing. Do we want the juries to see that because it colours their perception? Yeah. So there are understandable reasons why these things come about. Yeah. It's not that they're all out to get us quite. And I'm sure that some might be behind the scenes and are sort of capitalising on this. But generally speaking, this is the kind of the dangerous impulse is to place kind of algorithms over it, to slice and dice everything into kind of convenient boxes, algorithmize, if that's a word, turn everything into kind of algorithms and things like that. And I know that you're going to get onto that subject. So the real problem really lies in the fact that, as Magna Carta said, if you don't adhere to these principles entirely and absolutely, then effectively what you're doing is you're saying to government, okay, how much trial by jury can we actually have government? It's a principle, but you're going to decide how much, when we can have it, and when we can use our conscience. And that's the problem where we're going. And I think we're heading fast at the moment towards maybe a binding precedent because of the pressure that's building over this kind of stuff. So there we are. That's what's going on now.
William, thank you very much. A really excellent summary. I'm very pleased to say that you will be joining us for UK Column Extra today, so UK Column members will be able to hear us have at least another 30 minutes of discussion around this really, really vital issue. The state is closing in on freedoms. There is no question of this happening. Many people sense it, even if they don't really understand how it's being done. They understand that the state in the United Kingdom is becoming ever more oppressive. And if we lose the protection of jury trial, then, of course, the state can do entirely as it pleases, particularly, perhaps, Ben, if we say that a malicious AI system will be part of that judicial process.
Well, quite, Brian. Yeah, that's Will, thank you for that. That was fantastic. And if the chat box will have its way, we'll be doing another interview with you because the feedback was really good all the way through that. And you mentioned algorithms, which is something you and I have spoken about previously. And we will just very briefly touch on this post, which appeared on X over the weekend, which I just thought was fascinating, which is from Dean Ball, who is the head of strategic futures at OpenAI, one of the leading AI companies, at least partially owned and controlled by Microsoft, where he says there comes a time in every AI policy professional's life when they realize they have to read the Talmud to make further progress. And for me, that time was this week. The Talmud is one of the most important books in Judaism.
Also referenced by Lord Leveson in his recent review of jury trials in UK.
Indeed.
Front cover, he had a quote from the Talmud. There wasn't any equivalent Christian quote or quote from the Quran, simply from the Talmud. So draw whatever conclusions from that you like.
Yes, this seems to be the same powers are at play, evolving and changing the legal system as there are building the digital infrastructure that we're being told is needed to run our entire society. So I found this quote fascinating, and that deserves some much deeper exploration, which we won't be able to get into right now. One of the comments, in fact, the first comment that came up was from this chap, who I've spoken about previously. This is Alexander Ayasad, who's a director at Tony Blair's Institute, and he's the man running the digital identity program for Tony Blair, which basically means he's running it for the UK as well. And he's saying that he's tapping his already well-worn LLMs are spiritually Jewish sign. So the large language models that the AI systems are built on apparently are spiritually Jewish, and you need to read the Talmud in order to understand them. That's quite an amazing set of revelations, don't you think?
I would say, Ben, apart from anything else, this should be a huge wake-up call to anybody who considers themselves Christian in the United Kingdom in 2026, because something rather special is unfolding here.
No, that's certainly true. Yeah, and it's not just these two posts that I just happened to come across. This is a consistent theme, not least because both of these guys that I've mentioned already are extremely senior inside the technology and consulting hierarchy globally, not just here in the UK, this is international, but this is a theme that is emerging. This post came from Forward, where they're saying that we're losing control of AI. It's Judaism, the key to keeping it from killing us. So we've created this extraordinarily complex and dangerous thing. Most of the people who've actually created it are Jewish. And now we need Jewish belief system in order to control it.
And some of those people who've helped create it are, of course, deeply worried about what they have created.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Indeed, yes. Now, we do have a video. I'm afraid we don't have time to show it, but we will show that in extra. But I will just close this section by talking about this post. And again, we'll provide links to these in the show notes. I highly recommend and encourage you to go and read these, because I think it gives you a very clear indication of what's actually going on with these new technologies. This from a couple of years ago now saying, and this is on the Chabad website, chabad.org, Chabad, one of the largest rabbinical Jewish organization globally, saying, is AI the new Tower of Babel? So actually, do they view, and the people building these technologies understand it as a way to essentially engage in a battle with God? Because that's what the people who built the Tower of Babel were up to. They thought they could become gods themselves.
We need to get inside the minds of some of these people, and that's a very difficult thing to do, but clues are emerging.
They certainly are. Much, much more to come on that in future editions. Now, I'm just skipping through a few things here because we have run out of time, but I did just want to close the show today with this little video clip that I took on the weekend when I'm out and about around Devon, loving life. And I don't know if you can see here, this is some wonderful Devon heather, lavender, smelled incredible. And it's just absolutely swarming with bees.
Yeah, and your point is a lot of people are saying that bee population under great pressure, which it is, but we would just like to say, particularly in the beautiful weather that we've had down in Devon over the last few weeks at least, there's been a lot of bees out and also butterflies. So there is some good news to report.
There is certainly some good news to report. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much to everyone tuned in at home, watching live, or indeed watching the recording back, however you might be joining us. Brian, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's fine. There's no answer to that.
And massive thanks to Will Keyte. Don't forget, tonight at 7 o'clock, German Mike talking about the history of UK column. 9 o'clock, Carl Czar. Brian's Dipty interview at 1 p.m. tomorrow. And of course, Mike will be back with the team for the news at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. Until then, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.